Good morning, everyone. Welcome to FC Build and hope you've had a great time so far. For those of you who missed the morning sessions, let me quickly introduce myself and Foundation Capital. Foundation Capital is an early stage venture capital firm founded in 1995. We've had the privilege of working with several hundred companies, of which 31 companies have gone public. Our two main investment areas are fintech and enterprise. Within enterprise, we invest all the way from applications down to infrastructure and everything in between. We predominantly invest in companies that have no product and no revenues. So primarily seed and Series A investments. Our goal is to invest with extraordinary dreamers and help them realize those dreams. And so if that's one of you, well, get connected with me. I'm a general partner at Foundation Capital or one of my colleagues at the firm. But with no further ado, let me jump right into the panel that we have today. I have three great IT and technology leaders with me today in the panel, all of whom are reinventing IT organizations in their own right. I'll start with Dilip Venkatachari, who's currently the CIO of US Bank, the fifth largest bank in the US. Dilip is a serial fintech entrepreneur who's also had leadership roles at Google, PayPal, and McKinsey. We also have Manish Sinha, who's joining us today from Paris, right next to the Arc de Triomphe. Manish is the corporate CTO of L'Oreal, the world's largest cosmetics company. He's also been CIO of Ansys and UBS Asia before this, worked at Yahoo, and was a senior executive at Microsoft, where we worked together a few years ago. In addition, we have Vijay Luthra, who's the CIO for the wealth management business at Northern Trust, one of the oldest banks in continuous operation in the US, with more than 20% of the wealthiest families in this country as clients. Prior to this role, Vijay was also the Chief Technology Officer and the Global Head of Technology Infrastructure at Northern Trust. He has also worked at Citi, Merrill, and other financial institutions before that. So we have quite the panel with us, and I'll dive right into the questions. Maybe, Dilip, I can start with you. Tell us a little bit about what's changed in your world in the last 2 years.
A lot has changed, Ashu. And first, thanks for having me here and to be on this kind of panel together with Manish and Vijay. In the past few years, I think I'd say two sets of things have changed. First is our customers have all gone digital. And it sounds like a trivial issue. The pandemic really, really helped. And as a result of that, all banks, and we certainly are now focused on the next level of value. Previously, it was all about getting customers to go adopt digital channels and so on. So now that's a foregone conclusion. The second thing that has changed is the competitors are now a lot more, we see more fintechs, more varied players than the ones that we traditionally compete with. And so that is, in a sense, had all of us as banks looking to partner a lot more, looking to work with third parties, and I'll speak a little bit more about it. But fundamentally, these changes push from a technology standpoint. They really kind of focus us from trying to think through how do we offer better value to customers by stitching together services and data from third parties. So all of the things that you can think about, things like APIs, and so suddenly become more critical. And so that's the set of kind of key changes I've seen so far in the past few years.
That's super helpful. Thank you for sharing. Manish, you have a very different lens on the world and from a very different part of the world. Can you share a little bit about how L'Oreal's business has changed?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Ashu, for having us having us here. L'Oreal is an interesting organization. We sell the product which consumers use, but a few years ago, as much as 3 or 4 years ago, we used to be 100% sell-through, meaning we sold all our products through the Macy's of the world, the Monoprix of the world. There was no direct connection between the consumer and L'Oreal. We didn't know our customers. That has changed slowly before pandemic, but very, very fast after the pandemic. To give you an estimate of how fast we are changing, 4 years ago, we used to talk about being at 25% direct to consumer in 5 years. That was 4 years ago. And if you read our 10K equivalent, you will see, our goal is to get there in 5 years. We achieved that 25% during the pandemic. And we changed our goal. Now our goal is 50% in 4 years. Right? So, we have aspirations to become a direct-to-consumer, and the pandemic has helped us dramatically. It's been a lot of negatives, but this definitely is one huge change which is going through. The other big change which is going through is new markets are opening up. Markets we would not consider as the beauty market in big ways. You think about men beauty. That is our fastest growing business. You think about travel retail, people just flying from one city to another to shop for cosmetic and fly back. They don't get out of the airport. They go from one place to another, duty-free shop and get back, right? And you can see some of the countries where that's coming from. And the third growth area we see is the Middle East. A huge growth coming in for cosmetic from the Middle East. So the world is opening up in many different ways.
That's very cool. I was just doing the numbers in my head. I mean, L'Oreal's revenues are around $25 billion, give or take. So 50% online means, in a span of a few years, you're going to go from no online revenues to 12, 15 billion of online revenues.
The revenue last year was 35 billion euros, Ashu. So it's a little bit more than $25 billion.
Yeah.
It's more like 40. But you're right. I mean, if you do the math, it's all zeros after a number, right? So
yeah, it's massive.
It's a massive number. It's a massive number.
Just online revenues coming out of nowhere, and with all the associated issues in terms of building, supporting infrastructure, fraud management, payments, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Well, if you need a bank, you have two banks here. Vijay, curious to get your view. I mean, you have a very different perspective, both from Northern Trust's lens, but also from the lens of your clients, who are some of the wealthiest families in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for having me. Really appreciate being on the panel with Dilip and Manish. So actually, from my perspective, again, we're extremely fortunate. 130-year-old firm, founded 1889. We've been in this business of managing wealth for private investors as well as institutions for the past 130 years. So a lot of experience, phenomenal set of capabilities that we're working extremely hard to digitally enable for our clients. So what has happened over the last couple of years, I mean, clearly COVID was a macro trend, but there were several macro trends. And our digital strategy, the response to that was essentially a digital strategy that addresses majority of them, right? So if I could just name a couple, obviously COVID was a macro trend. ESG, environmental friendly investments are on the rise. Our investors are pushing us for portfolios that could be crafted in that space. Climate friendly investments. The cyber landscape essentially changed on us over the last couple of years. And perhaps even some of the more micro trends, like the taxation laws that are about to change again. Looking at that broad picture, because these things will continue to happen. Obviously, COVID is once in a century type event, hopefully. Our response to that, Ashu, was the following, right? We have a comprehensive strategy that addresses all of those scenarios. But one, we're going aggressively after user experience, right? We are very interested in how are these factors impacting our clients? What is the impact on them? It's similar to you, Dilip, trying to get a good understanding of what is happening in their lives with these macro and micro factors. We're doubling down on research and working extremely hard on trying to understand their behaviors using data that's available to us and as well as open in the marketplace. So specific examples in this space is tooling that can help us gather information that's externally available, data that we have internally available, tying it back to our internal development pipeline, and sort of building an integrated. Again, some of the tooling exists; it's not fully mature yet, but a lot of focus around trying to figure out how to better deal with the data in the front end, the user research, and then feeding it into our roadmaps and backlogs and pipelines. Heavy focus on that. Digital collaboration, obviously no brainer, huge focus area based on the macro and micro factors. Rolling out digital collaboration hub, better way of interacting with them, better way of exchanging documents. couple scenarios. Think about a global family office when they want to interact with us. In the old days, we could possibly meet in the offices, but in this new day and age, the family office CFO, the family members, the attorneys, our advisor, they all want to collaborate on a set of documents, and that has to be digitally enabled. That's one scenario. Another scenario, family offices to family office collaboration, enabling collaboration between family offices. You can't go to Google and search what are the top challenges family offices have. That type of information is rarely available out on the internet. So enabling that type of platform where they can collaborate is a huge area of focus. Again, data and analytics, we're going heavily after that. How can we make the advisor discussions and conversations with the clients more meaningful? Taking some of the ideas from the consumer side, what is the next best action?
Makes sense.
Here's the types of topics you should be talking about. 70% of these types of clients have a GRAT. What about your client? Have they got a similar set of service? So that huge area of focus. And then ways of working. Extremely passionate about just completely revamping how we operate, and agile teams and fusion teams, and working horizontally and vertically in platform teams and journey teams. So that was a huge area of focus. And then last, just cyber. I mean, the game changed over the last 12, 18 years. So focus on zero trust and secure pipelines, et cetera, became a huge. So again, that's how we responded to it based on some of the changes.
Vijay, that's super helpful. And I want to come back to some of these in a minute and double click on some of these changes. But again, just to continue the round robin, Dilip, how have these changes translated into sort of changes in priorities for the IT organization? Because we've just, talked about a very broad swath of business changes, which I'm sure have possibly marginally changed your IT priorities, possibly turned them upside down.
I think the change has actually been quite dramatic, and maybe I'll kind of put it slightly differently. The traditional narrative on banks and bank technology has been there, usually a few years behind, because they tend to want to get more tested and proven technologies before they actually adopt things. Through the pandemic and even kind of prior to that, there's been so much more investment in as kind of Vijay was talking about, kind of the digital transformation, right? And that's the same thing that Manish was referring to in his industry. The same has been applied so much to the point that banks' technologies have improved dramatically. And just from a headline standpoint, and I compare this to my prior life, with kind of the larger tech companies, and frankly, banks are getting almost just as good. In terms of the two things that have changed are skills are current, in terms of current technologies, current capabilities, and all of that. And second, processes are a lot more nimble, right? And there's a lot of efforts gone to kind of change that. So this then translates to, so what does it mean for priorities? So in a sense, if you look at a bank like ours, which is fairly diversified in the sense we have consumer, small business, all of the credit cards, payments, merchant acquiring, and wealth management, corporate trust, and kind of the entire gamut. You have different challenges in each of the businesses, but the common themes are the velocity has increased. So one of the asks is, how do you move things faster? How do you get things, new features, new products faster into the market? How do you start leveraging third parties, partners, kind of data or services? Because increasingly, what any one entity delivers to a customer is not just entirely made up within their four walls. It has to be kind of pulled together, much like the kind of trivial example of Uber Maps coming from Google or whatever. But fundamentally, I think those kinds of pressures are moving banking. It's less the kind of the regulatory push on open banking APIs or some such, but more customer value driven. And that's actually more powerful, more enduring, I think, because you're getting something based on kind of something that is making both the banks, the customers, the regulators, and everyone be on the same with the same set of objectives. And so lots of change. I mean, and many of the items that Vijay just spoke about are really kind of core and fundamental to most of the areas.
That's super helpful, Dilip. If I could ask a follow-on question, as those changes are happening, are there, one or two areas that you're looking for help from startups in particular? Like if you had to draw up your sort of wish list to say, if I could find a startup that could do blah, I
I'd
would
say it's
definitely.
very, very straightforward. I think there's a broader answer to that. Is you may be a bit surprised or may not be surprised at all, which is we are looking to partner with much, much, much earlier stage companies than we ever did before, partly because I think a realization as you look at the market, a lot of the players with commanding performances, you look at players like Affirm and others, they have not been in the market long enough. And so they've demonstrated that it's okay to, that necessarily experience and time and duration. Tenure doesn't necessarily guarantee a value, and it's not necessarily a detractor from being able to provide value consumer services. And that basically means we're looking for partnerships with the customer value. It could be point partnership. For example, is there an interesting collections, is a credit algorithm that we should test something out with our customers? To even more in the technology shop, core systems, we are actively looking at, are there things to be learned from, core fundamental systems from third parties that may be only 5, 6, 7 years in, as opposed to 30-year companies. So all across the board, point solutions to core horizontal platforms to open source technologies in the like.
That's super helpful. Manish, what about you? How have your, as you're moving to such a large online and direct to consumer business, how have your IT priorities changed?
Yeah, so multiple different facets to talk about, Ashu. First one is what is changing. And what is changing are, I look at, there are 4 types of priorities, there's 4 types of change which is coming through. The first one is mandatory changes. These are either regulatory, these are security, these are, keep the business safe, right? The banks will tell you there is a lot of regulations, it's a regulated industry, these are just forced down and you have to mandate and you have to do it in X number of time. Mm-hmm. The same exists in beauty, the same exists in medical. We are semi-beauty, semi-medical. So there's a lot of regulations which are being pushed down as well. There is security issues, right? These are in the first category of mandatory changes you just cannot but prioritize as number 1.
Yep.
The second set of priorities are how do you grow revenue, right? And these are not faster, better, cheaper ways of growing revenue. These are just incremental ways of doing revenue. We are, like the example I gave you, we are a B2B to C customers. Now we are going direct to consumer. That's a completely different way of selling, different ways of learning. It's not just, making bigger stores, prettier stores, partnering with maybe more different companies. Those days are behind us.
Yeah.
Third level comes in where you can save cost for the business. So, when startups come and tell me I can save you 10%, 12%, 15%, whatever the number is of the cost, you're automatically at priority number 3, right? So if you're not getting the ear of the CIO or the CTO, you can understand why. Yeah. And the fourth is cosmetics. This looks better. These are much nicer ways of doing things, etc. And the time frame of change has gone from, we used to talk about 4 or 5 years of change. We're talking of 18 months or even shorter, right? The change has to be much faster, which basically means you've come down from 10 priorities or 12 priorities over 5 years to 3 priorities over 18 months. So fewer priorities, different hierarchy, shorter time frame. There's a lot of pressures which are coming from different sides. And one thing which that enables is there is a lot more awareness, there is a lot more willingness to fail fast forward, which goes back to the point Dilip was making, the ability or the desire to work with startups. They can help us fail fast forward, yep. Right? Learn faster, go back on that 18-month window and say, plan 2, plan 3, plan 4, right? I don't call them as plan B, C, or D. They are just different plans you have to work through. And after 999 times, the light bulb will come through, right? That multiple changes are going through in a D2C like business.
That's super helpful. And Vijay, curious on what are the implications on the business changes you talked about on your IT needs? Are there a few things that you're buying more of and other things that you're saying I'm going to buy less of?
Yeah. So Ashu, again, agree a lot with Dilip and Manish, right? Focus on increasing velocity, focus on partnerships, fintechs, point solutions. I agree with it. Very, tons of commonalities. I talked about areas in cyber that we're heavily focused on. But Ashu, the key change though, from an IT priority perspective, or in terms of how we operate, the underlying change that we're trying to bring, and this is based on what we learned from the COVID days, was cross-functional teams aligned to a mission, purpose, no restrictions, decision-making authority, empowered teams go accomplish those goals. Taking that example and sort of working backwards and reorganizing ourselves, focused on that, right? In the traditional enterprise, having a leader follower model of the past, the militaristic style of operating at times, versus the new mode of operating in the leader model, is probably the only way to scale a digital operation. So I guess the key point I'm making there, Ashu, is bringing the decision making and the innovation, not making it a central theme or you are accountable, but bringing it in front of the teams, those cross-functional teams that are aligned to a mission or something that's valuable to a client, and letting them decide and move fast forward is essentially a key change we've seen. And the opportunity here for the entrepreneurs is there's this rise of the versatilists, as Gartner likes to call them. And what tooling do they need is very different than the tooling from the past, right? So they might need information about their DevOps pipelines, about their applications, which might be in APM, or another set of information, which might be in ServiceNow. It's all over and often guarded and protected. And I think that has to change because the power and the teams are getting smaller and they're more empowered to make decisions, yet they don't have all the information. So I would love for the entrepreneurs to sort of think of this rising skill set, cross-functional skills, versatile skills, and what is it that they will need to continue to move faster.
That's super helpful, Vijay. I'd love to push you a little bit to say, given that context, are there examples of things you need or companies that you have seen that you think these are very interesting?
Yeah,
I'm going to translate that into, what is it that entrepreneurs should be doing that would help you meet those needs?
Yeah, great example is before we take on a client journey, we're so heavily focused on zero-based design. What is the true North Star vision of what this client journey experience should look like? Heavy focus on research. We then translate that into backlog. So now we went from user experience data, Google Analytics, Amplitudes. Now we're into Jira's of the world. Now we move into our DevOps pipelines. And then we connect them to OKRs, which could be an ally. Like my point is, right there, just that process methodology, we've gone through 4, 5, 6 different tools. And this does not include monitoring, APM, cloud deployments, like all of that is yet more and more systems. So that just that pipeline in itself, we've found that, again, we're trying to glue multiple things together, but it's still not completely well integrated.
Got it. All three of you talked about cyber at some point in this discussion, and as an investor, I'm seeing it, like 5 years ago, everyone thought cyber was going to have a handful of successful companies. Today, cyber seems the hottest thing ever. And so it seems like something has changed in the last 18, 24 months. Can you talk a little bit about what has changed? And therefore, what are your top 2 or 3 cyber priorities?
Yeah. So, you talked about 4 or 5 years ago, Ashu, right? Think about 5 years ago. If you joined a large enterprise, what would your first day look like? Here's your laptop. It's a, L'Oreal branded, Microsoft branded, US Bank branded, whatever it is, right? You can log in and you cannot even, I remember in UBS, we had so much security on that laptop. I could not put my personal pictures to make them backgrounds. right? It was a professional laptop. It had a UBS background, and that was it, right? I could not save anything on it other than UBS documents. Today, fast forward 5 years, I have no idea where my employees are working from, home or hotel, or I have no idea which network they are working from. They could be on a private network, they could be on a VPN, they may not be on a personal VPN. It could be secure, it may not be secure. We have no idea which laptop they are using. I'm working on my laptop. Later, I go into the other room, I pick up my daughter's laptop, and I'm connected, I'm checking. So the whole world has completely changed, right? How do you keep information secure in that kind of an environment where you don't control the endpoint, you don't control the pathway between the endpoint to the data, right? That's big change number one. Big change number two, privacy is becoming equally big in every part of the world. You've heard about GDPR, we've heard about the California, China is coming up, India is coming up. Everybody's coming up with privacy laws of their own, and they're not the same.
Yep.
Now, how do you deal with people who are working around the world and contributing and creating content, but the company is headquartered in France and governed by GDPR? And that throws, yet another complete different challenge. So I combine security and privacy as that mandatory top bracket, which I talked about. These things just have to be done, right? This is not about looks good or whatever. This has to be done. There are no big players who are proven in these ways of working. So we have to look for startups. We have to look for entrepreneurs who can come and explore the world with us, solve the problems with us, and grow potentially with us.
That's super helpful. Are there specific projects within this bucket that you're struggling with today? For all the security entrepreneurs that are listening, is there one or two things you say, hey, if you guys are doing blah, call me?
Encryption, data protection on encryption, unprotected wires, right? Data being transmitted, which are secure data, right? It's not just about encryption. It's coming in from session changes, right? When you download data, which session are you working on? How is that data being shared? So if you are working on protecting data coming from different places into L'Oreal's environment,
yeah,
that would be a place I would love to talk to people. There's a couple of very good startups which I've been talking from Israel. So Israel, for some reason, is very hot on security.
Yep.
And there's some very good ones I'm talking to, but that's not decided yet. So
I'll follow up. I have some ideas for you, but let's follow up offline. So data protection in general, especially data protection for data that's coming in, across the wire.
Yeah.
And some of it is encrypted, some is not, and how do you sort of manage that? That absolutely makes a ton of sense. Vijay and Dilip, curious what you guys think on the cyber side. What would you add?
Go for it, Bill.
I'd say the basis for why is kind of obvious. Just the security, kind of the threat vectors are increasing and exponentially. So, and if there's one thing that keeps probably all of us awake at night, it's security incidents and things of that nature which you can't control. So I would say probably three broad areas. I mean, security is a very complex topic, but if I was if as an entrepreneur looking at areas, there's three interesting areas, and some of them are spoken for, or at least advanced, and some are more kind of open to exploitation. I mean, as in entrepreneurship. Actually, the first one is remote work from home. That's going to open up a new set of opportunities for all of for entrepreneurs, and certainly for us, that's a big source of risk. When we deal with customer information, consumer information, our customers' information being available in some manner by used by people who are working from home as opposed to our more controlled facilities, that's a big risk. So figuring out that one. The second one is what Manish spoke about, data in all its forms, because ultimately you just want to protect encrypted data. Last one, increasingly cloud. Cloud's not just securing the data in the cloud, but all the transmission back and forth. You have multiple clouds, you have on-prem and cloud, and so ensuring kind of security across those dimensions is actually a big area. So I'd say, if I was to put, ask people to focus on, I'd say if you pick problems that attack these three use cases, that would be quite powerful.
That's super helpful, Dilip. Vijay, what is your version of these three things?
Yeah, I would say a couple areas that are high priorities and keep me up at night. One, just the pipeline. We rely on partnerships. We've got folks that are helping us develop software and code. Just after the SolarWinds and some of those other issues, the DevOps pipeline and injecting more and more security and integrity of the code, it's just always a huge area of focus and priority for us. And I would say just the other trend that was accelerated as part of COVID was just zero trust pervasive, not just in the data center, but right from the edge into the data center, to the data level, to the database, at the access level, just zero trust as a mindset. And there's not a technology that quote unquote solves zero trust. It's a bunch of solutions that have to come together. But focusing on your crown jewels and then working outwards, right? So the edge, VPN, Zscaler, within the data center, there's various options for securing workloads. Illumio, great example. But again, I think just pervasive zero trust. I think that is the fastest we can get there. The overall threat surface would reduce significantly. So that's another area of focus.
That's super helpful. So, having talked about cyber, and it's clear just from this conversation and more broadly across the last half an hour that all of you are looking to work with startups that are earlier in their journey, and with startups, in diverse areas. When I put my startup investor hat on, if one of my portfolio companies were to come to me in a board meeting early on and say, hey, I'm engaging with US Bank, or I'm engaging with Northern Trust or L'Oreal, I have to be honest, I would be super nervous. I don't think you're going to make the quarter. I don't think this is a winning strategy to make the quarter for a startup, which has a handful of customers. And so, the dichotomy there is, it seems like what's happening is in certain categories, you've become early adopters. And in other categories of software, you're still more sort of a mainstream buyer or sort of a late adopter, depending on your own priorities. Right. So what advice do you have for startups on how to engage with your organizations to better figure out if there's mutual fit? Dilip, I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, I was going to comment.
You've been a startup entrepreneur many times.
And I've tried hard to sell to banks, yes. I'd say it's not, I would characterize it slightly differently. There are areas in which we are less open or more open. There is a common process requirement to be, for any software, for any partnership in a regulated environment. There are kind of third-party kind of risk management mechanisms and so on. So I think the main message, the main change, it's not the processes, the structures, kind of the things that one has to, the gates have changed, but the gates are a lot more, people manning the gates are a lot more aware, a lot more cognizant of kind of, you don't send a questionnaire that says, by the way, we'd like to get your management structure and kind of your balance sheet. You realize that those things may not be materially kind of useful pieces of information to ask, or you would get that. So those are, if you kind of step back and looking at it from the inside, from where I've moved from the outside world, so to speak, I see those processes actually being helpful. They do, have a meaningful. They provide value in maintaining, ensuring, the kind of the integrity of the services, and reduces the risk to consumers and so on. The application of those policies is what has changed. What has changed right now is an openness, saying, look, let's fast track these people because we need a customer. So the advice is two things. As always, be persistent. Don't give up easily. But more importantly, find the one use case, and this is probably an obvious one. Find the use case that has the most time-sensitive value. Right, that's what is going to get you. If you want to get a time-sensitive response, it's not solve world hunger, but what is the immediate thing that's going to show meaningful progress in a short amount of time.
I think, Dilip, what you said is something that, we had this long conversation actually in a panel yesterday with several sort of VPs of marketing of very successful startups that have gone public. And it's this real balance between showing a big vision and, having the desire and the dream to solve world hunger one day. But then you've got to do something that puts food on the table tomorrow for somebody, because unless there's an immediate pain point, it's really hard for a buyer to engage. Like the vision is interesting, but not necessary, but not sufficient, is perhaps the way to say it. And I think I'm hearing that from you as well. What would you add to that, Vijay?
Yeah,
what advice do you have? I mean, you've worked with multiple startups over the years and helped some of them be successful.
Yeah, we've just had a phenomenal track record, as you know, Ashu, working with startups. Right from the Nutanix days, the first 100 customers, Cohesity, Illumio, you name it, dozen plus startups where we brought them in at the right time. And to Dilip's point, when they addressed a very specific use case, we had our ways to mitigate some of the risks that do come with some of the early startups. So you use them in test and dev and non-prod environment. There's ways to bring them in, let them prove themselves. So there's 100% that process of how you engage matters. But then I want to just double click on what Dilip just said. I think that is, as much as it's obvious, and I'm stealing this line from somebody and I'm probably going to butcher it, but the least lines of code and the maximum value delivered, right? That's the sweet spot. And to Dilip, your point, find that use case that gets you that use, that's something that's valuable to the client. Don't go after the complex use case, early on in the life cycle.
That's super helpful. Manish, what advice do you have?
So a couple of things. I mean, I would just add to what Vijay and Dilip have already said, right? The use case is important. The speed of that use case being delivered is important, but so is the big vision, right? What are we going to solve? It may not be world hunger, but what is the big thing we are going to solve eventually, right? And yes, it will start small. And companies like L'Oreal and others, which I've worked for, right? They also want to go step by step. They don't want to solve world hunger in 1 year or 2 years, right? They want to go step by step, solving that use case one by one. So it's important to see what that big vision is. So the advice for the startups would be, what is the big vision we are solving? What is the use case which can give immediate resolution? You've already talked about, the 3 or 4 priority levels. We've talked about the world changing in different ways. Dilip talked about working from home being a big priority. Look at all of this and say, which issue are we solving? And what is the end game when that issue is resolved? But what is step number 1? And how do we get to step number, whatever the end game is?
That's super helpful. And are there examples, Manish, of startups that you've worked with, either at L'Oreal or in prior lives? I mean, you've worked with so many very large and successful organizations that there's a case study of success that has worked for you that you can share.
Yeah, there is. So I'll talk about one. I think Dilip hinted on this a little bit. 4 or 5 years, few years ago, when I was with the bank, security and data privacy used to be for, let's say, the help desk, the support people, right? For them, the security was, you have to work from one room, one terminal is yours. You cannot take a pen or paper. You cannot take a phone inside, right? And you should be checked twice to take all of those things. The protection we were giving is, I ran wealth management. So like you, Vijay, we had rich clients. Nobody wanted to take pictures of, what your net worth looked like and, go sell that data outside, right? We had a few cases where people would memorize things and go out, but that was the best you could do in terms of data privacy. Now those same agents are working from their own homes, helping the same customers. How do we protect the data? How do we protect the visibility of the data? How do we make sure those data are not downloaded on the personal computer and suddenly I have a portfolio of rich people who are sitting in, et cetera, right? So there's a startup which actually came out of Philippines, fairly small, has been acquired in the last 1.5 years already. And they have very good technology, which is now being integrated in L'Oreal. And all our support professionals have that on their desktops. And that is a mandate for helping customer support, even though we don't deal with we don't deal with only rich clients. We have a lot of customers who are fairly rich, but the data privacy is equally important, especially with GDPR. Every data privacy is as important as an extremely rich client.
That's super helpful. Any success stories, Dilip, you and Vijay would like to share?
Go for it, Vijay.
Or examples of failure. So if you have a story that was a vivid failure, like you're like this is a case of how not to work with us. That's helpful too.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Tons of success stories, Nutanix, Cohesity, Illumia, tons. But the failures are painful.
Yeah.
Because when the market moves, direction changes. Docker was a great example. We bet very early on containers, very early on, even when it was not known that Kubernetes was gonna succeed, and that switch from Swarm to Kubernetes was painful. And then Docker got taken out by Mirantis, and that was painful. That was a painful experience.
Quite a few to speak to, but I think as opposed to the names, I'd say some of the classes, the interesting classes, have been things that do with data and data. Think about it as AI for customer value. So a lot of we've tested quite a few products that can use information to provide better, different, varied scores on customers. Maybe insights for customers when you show up on your online bank. And so there's been a lot of evolution in that industry, and quite hopeful that we'll see a lot more. But across the board, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think the key for us is to figure out how much we can digest and absorb. We need to ultimately we have a customer kind of platform. We need to pick one, test it, and that whole process, because we want to look at what customers actually how did it work for customers.
Yeah.
Did it actually add value? And so that process takes a bit of time to go through that. So but engagement with startups, I think across the board, kind of the main message is same as what Vijay and Manish were talking about. It's picked up quite a bit more, and so hopefully a message of hope to everyone listening.
That's super helpful. I think we only have a minute or two left. We had a whole host of questions around the talent shortage and collaboration. I don't know if any one of you would like to sort of pick up the thread on that. We're all facing, everyone from startups to Fortune 10 companies is facing a huge talent shortage. And I think everyone's struggling with how do you collaborate in a post-COVID world? If there are one or two things that, have worked for you, one or two challenges you're facing that you'd like to share, I'd like to do a quick round robin before we wrap up, maybe 30 seconds each. Manish?
Yeah, so, the good part of what we have talked about is the world is now flat and we can see talent around the world. The bad part of that is there are work-related issues, employee-related issues, which exist around the world, and they are not the same. So be careful. It's easy to open up the world, but be careful before you start opening up the world.
Vijay?
Yeah, I'll say the supply side is the supply side. There's only so much you could do. So you could open the borders, you could do a lot of things. We're going after the demand side. Like, how can we make it more interesting? to work for Northern Trust. So we just completely revamped our hiring process around digital, defined EVP, actually trained all the interviewers on how to interview, connected the interviews to our guiding principles more closely, interview days, same day, just completely revamped how we do digital hiring, how we retain, how we train, how we track their career roadmaps, how we move them around. And we've seen some good success. Again, supply side is the supply side, but we're trying to alter the other side of the equation.
That's super helpful. Dilip, you get the final
just 2
word.
things. The demand side exactly is that kind of making it more important to go out and kind of make a case to the employees to kind of why they need to be with us. Equally importantly, we are trying to change the supply to the extent we can by going into the community and trying to train people who typically from disadvantaged communities who probably didn't have kind of the opportunity for education. And we found long term, we've been doing this for a few years, and that has been quite effective, particularly if you're looking for kind of long-term growth paths, something to get beyond simply waiting for people to apply for jobs. We're trying to go into colleges and into communities and try and kind of create those programs. And early days, but they've been quite successful so far.
So that's great to hear. Well, I've been investing on both the supply and demand side. So on the supply side, there's Turing. If you want engineers from anywhere in the world, with fully secured virtual laptops, you got to go try Turing. And on the demand side, Eightfold, in fact, works with some of you already. It is now working with at least 50 of the Fortune 500 companies to help them manage talent pipelines and talent demand. So it's definitely, I think, a problem that's going to be in the forefront for all of us for the coming decade. Thank you very much for the time. And thank you so much for being so upfront about both the opportunities and challenges of working with your organizations. This was a very productive conversation.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Ashu.
Thanks, Vinay. Thanks,
Thanks,
Manish.
Dilip.
Thanks, Dilip.
Cheers.